Ducati shook the monument in 2025. The beautiful single-sided swing arm has disappeared from the Streetfighter V4S, and everything has been trimmed towards performance. More power, more aerodynamics. The question is, do you need it? Can you still make use of it? That's what we're trying to find out for you. We were out and about for 2 days on country roads and 2 days on the racetrack. This is going to be an intense test video. In 2025, there were a few tiers among Ducati enthusiasts. I already mentioned it in the intro. The single-sided swing arm is gone, but the entire bike, I can tell you that much, has been further optimized for maximum performance. We're talking almost superbike level, honestly. So it's really unbelievable. 214 horsepower on a naked bike. That is quite the experience. And of course, to make the whole thing more rideable, they've tweaked the ergonomics, they've worked on the aerodynamics. For me, it was just really exciting to be able to ride this bike. But I wasn't testing alone, of course. I had some colleagues along for the ride. Joining us was Martin Bauer, 3-time IDM champion and the technical guru of the 1000 PS team. Also on board was Lena Kemmer, a young racing talent from Austria who competed in the Women's World Championship last year. Our sporty all-rounder from the 1000 PS editorial team, Philip, was also part of the crew. And then there's me, yours truly, Max. I contributed too, of course. Many intense impressions are coming your way now. Let's dive into the first category. It's unbelievable. 214 horsepower on the road. Naturally, when I hopped on today, the first question that popped into my head was, can you even still make use of all that? And if yes, how rideable is it? And the surprise for me was actually even bigger, because Ducati really nailed the setup. That means when you choose the street mode or the standard configured sport mode on the display, you immediately notice when you first open the throttle. Yeah, sounds good, has a bit of vibration, a bit of character, but the throttle response is smooth and I can gently deliver the power to the rear wheel. And of course, once the revs start climbing, 4,000, 5,000 RPM, you already feel there's serious power available. And the real fireworks kick in once you rev it up into the 5-digit RPM range. That's when things really happen and the machine surges forward. If I had to look for downsides, they would be, in my opinion, the vibrations coming through the chassis. You feel them when your legs are pressed against the tank or in the foot pegs. Especially during highway stretches, I noticed it tingles quite a bit. So yeah, you can definitely feel there's serious power under you. You can tell you're sitting on a sporty machine. In the handlebars, they've managed to isolate it pretty well. But yeah, this motorcycle tells you visually, I have power. It tells you through the saddle, through the feedback, through the level of vibration, I have power. And when you twist that throttle, there's no holding back. Truly magnificent. If you've never tried something like this, maybe go pay your Ducati dealer a visit and ask if you can take it for a test ride. It really is quite the experience.
Below 3000 RPM, the engine starts to run a bit rougher and begins to stutter slightly. But that's also understandable. This thing revs well beyond 12, 13, 14,000 RPM. So it's clear that the engine is designed for high revs. The real power delivery doesn't kick in until about 6,000 RPM. That's also where you really notice that it operates heavily on the sporty side. But from 6,000, 7,000 RPM onwards, that's when the fireworks really begin. It's a blast. It's got a throaty, punchy sound. And even with Euro 5+, it still sounds really good. The engine really comes alive and throws down proper power from 9,000 RPM onwards. Of course, that's already pretty extreme for the street, you have to admit. The only real point of criticism here is that, for example, with the quick shifter, you can't downshift during acceleration.
It seems to me like it has more reaction to load changes. And with no other motorcycle I rode today did I struggle as much in tight hairpins as I did with the Streetfighter. And that's because, first of all, when I roll off the throttle, I have the feeling that the bike still pushes on a little bit. The engine braking wasn't entirely transparent to me, I have to say honestly. And also that gentle throttle application where you kind of wobble or slowly roll into a tight hairpin, that was really hard for me to manage. So this feeling at the throttle, from coasting to applying just the right amount of load, that wasn't quite as smooth or intuitive today on this bike, no matter which mode I was riding in, as I would have hoped. As for the quick shifter, I have to say it's how I know it and how I'm used to it. So for me, it works well. Not perfectly. I'm especially thinking about downshifting and in which rev range. If you're in the high rev range, the quick shifter works really well. If you're in the mid range or lower revs, then I have to say you can feel it. It jerks a little and it clunks a bit on the chain. Well, that's just how it is. It's a sport bike, it's a sport engine, and accordingly you simply need a bit higher RPM for everything to run smoothly and harmoniously.
The electronic suspension from Öhlins is already pretty well known. We've got a TTX shock in the rear and a 43mm upside down fork up front, which can be adjusted electronically in terms of damping. I can have that controlled automatically by the computer, that is by the ECU, or I can switch into manual mode where I can individually configure rebound and compression damping just the way I like it. Overall, you have to say they've done a good job here, specifically managing to cover a broad range. Even though it's clearly on the sportier side, there's still enough ride comfort, especially when things get bumpy on rough roads, that even touring-oriented riders will feel at home here. You're not bouncing around uncontrollably, and the suspension still manages to absorb those bumps pretty well. On the other hand, it's also firm enough that you get a lot of feedback from the tires in fast corners and at high speeds, and there's very little movement in the chassis. So yeah, they've done a pretty solid job achieving that balance with this suspension setup.
The third generation of Öhlins Smart EC is built in here, truly the highest end component you can find in the world of stock suspension systems. But the financial investment really pays off when you're out riding. It's honestly fantastic what kind of range this suspension can deliver. In the most comfortable mode I tried today, it genuinely felt like I was gliding over potholes and rough patches of asphalt, thinking to myself, am I sitting on an adventure touring bike right now? It's honestly unbelievable how much comfort this suspension can offer on a hyper naked. I really wouldn't have thought that was even possible. And then, on the other side of the spectrum, when you trim it toward performance, and I had a bit of a chat with Martin Bauer about it, we looked over the settings together, and the way he dialed it in, the feedback suddenly became super crisp. You really start to feel every imperfection in the road very precisely. You also get an incredibly good sense of what's happening at the front end. That's also partially due to the ergonomics and the front wheel focused riding position, of course. But what you build up with this suspension quality is an enormous amount of trust. That feedback you get when you want it, but also the comfort it provides when you need it most on poor and uneven roads. That's just really, really impressive.
What stands out with this bike, especially when you ride it in a sporty or faster way, is that compared to the competition, you sit relatively far forward, very close to the handlebars. I'll maybe just demonstrate that real quick by hopping on. You can see that the distance to the steering axis at the front is quite short, and I'm actually sitting pretty upright. That's interesting because when you think about it from a sport perspective, you might expect something different, but it actually gives you a really good front end feel and, how should I put it, good handling. The handlebars are relatively wide, I'd say wider than on quite a few other bikes, and that gives really nice leverage at the bars. But what sets this bike apart is that despite that, it still delivers a lot of stability even at high speeds. That's not exactly a typical strength of naked bikes, staying stable at high speeds, but this one does it very well. And thanks to the short distance from the seat to the steering head, it still feels very agile. So even in tight hairpins, like the ones we rode today, it's incredibly easy to control, and you could say it still steers confidently all the way to the steering lock. The knee angle is of course very sporty, but it's still manageable. For me, with my 1.80 m height and fairly long legs, it kind of works, just barely. without cutting off my blood circulation entirely. The foot peg position is at a height where I'd say lean angle clearance is really not a problem here. The wind protection is interesting. So even though it's quite open at the front and there isn't much shielding from the oncoming wind, it's not actually bothersome. Of course, you do feel the wind pressure, but there aren't any annoying turbulences that make your head or helmet shake violently. You've got a good field of view, and I have to say that part is really well done.
I have an older V4, basically the first generation, and you can definitely tell that the handlebar is now wider. What I didn't like so much about the handlebar though is that the ends of the bar sort of angle downward a bit. So the bend dips down slightly. That's something other Ducatis have had in the past too. You could probably fix it by just rotating the bars up a little, but to be honest, I personally don't really like the fact that the ends droop down a bit. What I also want to mention is the very good foot peg position. For me, at 1.85 m, it's both comfortable and sporty. But what's really excellent is that thanks to the under-engine exhaust, there's no huge pipe sticking out and getting in the way. That means you can position your foot, especially your right foot, however you want, either comfortably or in a more aggressive stance. And you've got a lot of room to move without anything interfering when riding hard. So that's really been done tip-top.
You've got the bike nicely between your legs and you can really control it well using your legs, which is obviously important when you're dealing with this kind of power. All in all, it feels very confident and honestly, you could say easy to ride. And of course, the weight of the bike plays a role in that too. It comes in at 189 kilograms dry. And you can feel that there's just not that much mass being thrown around in the corners. That makes it a bit easier to manage.
We've got a relatively short seat-to-steering head distance here. That gives us handling characteristics that are very much like a sport bike. On one hand, that's great for the handling, and combined with the wide handlebar, it makes the Ducati incredibly easy to lean over and steer through slow corners. But at the same time, it doesn't lose stability at higher speeds. And that's one of the most important aspects. Combining those two things is always a bit tricky, and they've really nailed it on this bike. What we have here is more or less a monocoque chassis, where the frame only runs from here to here, and all the forces are channeled through the engine back to the swing arm, and that gives us very little weight in this area as a result. The monocoque frame only weighs a few kilos. It's really become very light, and of course that contributes to the light handling as well. It's very easy to flick the bike from one lean angle to the other, but at the same time it still has enough stability to give you solid front end feel and lets you carve tight lines without the bike getting unsettled.
In terms of overall handling, you can also feel that the rotating masses, meaning the wheel stint, are very light. You've got forged wheels again here on the S models, and despite all the stability that's obviously built into this bike, a lot of which has been carried over from the Panigale in terms of construction, it still changes direction incredibly easily and effortlessly. And thanks to the wide handlebar, you can really steer it into a corner with precision. Even in the tightest hairpins and tightest corners, it handled better than I initially expected from the bike. I was honestly surprised at how intuitively it turns in. Up front, this really wide format display packs in a lot of information very well. From my point of view, the overall readability is good too. And when it comes to the controls, I have to say Ducati has updated them a bit for this latest generation. You do have to spend a little time getting used to them. If you want to dive deep into the menu, it takes a few button presses and a few layers of menus before you get to where you want to be. So you really have to take some time to get familiar with it. But once you've got it down as an owner, it works wonderfully. What I especially like is that while riding, you can adjust certain functions and parameters, like traction control or wheelie control.
All the rider aids are on board anyway. I don't think I need to list them all individually anymore. You've got everything that modern technology can offer these days. The systems themselves also work really well. Even when you operate them in the softer modes where there are fewer interventions, as a rider, you still have a huge amount of freedom. I really like that a lot, especially with the ABS. I have the option to deactivate the rear wheel ABS functionality and really slide the bike around like a supermoto. Whereas in the softer ABS mode, where the rear wheel lift detection is active, the bike stays extremely well online. And that's an advantage, of course, for all those who prefer to ride more safely.
Today was my first time riding the Ducati Streetfighter V4S. As a journalist, it was also my first time braking with Brembo's high pure brakes. That's the latest generations. If you want, you could say one step above. It's basically the successor to the Stylema calipers. They're even lighter, saving a few more grams. But let's put aside the brochure language. What matters to me is how they perform. And I can tell you, they work splendidly. Looking at the hardware, you've got a heavily floated 330mm disc, these high pure calipers mounted radially, and a very high quality adjustable Brembo brake master cylinder up top. With these components, nothing can really go wrong. You also have steel braided brake lines installed. The braking feel is basically exactly what the look promises. It looks sporty and it brakes sporty. The deceleration is really on point. That means I don't just have a crisp bite point, but also a very aggressive braking system that, in my opinion, ranks at super sport level. Essentially, it's the exact same setup you find on a Panigale V4. In terms of function, reserve and stability on the road, there's absolutely nothing to complain about. It's really top-notch for throwing down the anchor and braking hard and sporty.
I have to say, the brakes are absolutely brilliant. This combination really works sensationally well, and not just on the racetrack, but also out here on the street. We get extreme deceleration that's easy to modulate and doesn't come across as too aggressive. So even though the ABS regulation cuts in a bit during heavy braking, and I don't mean that in a negative way, more like as a backup, I still have a lot of feel for the brakes. The bite point is excellent, which isn't always a given with ABS-equipped systems. They've done a great job with that. And the braking system here includes a kind of combined ABS, meaning when I brake at the front, the system also applies some braking to the rear. That helps stabilize the whole bike under braking, especially at the start of a braking maneuver. It helps to slightly straighten the bike and keep it nicely on line. That's not just helpful for experienced riders, especially beginners benefit from that extra braking stability. And for those who have trouble balancing front and rear brake inputs on their own, this system gives you some additional support since you're essentially using one lever to operate both brakes. And as we mentioned earlier, for those who really want to go all out and have a good feel for the bike, you've got the option to deactivate the ABS on the rear wheel. That lets you slide into a corner or generally bring a bit of movement into the chassis while decelerating. And that's not just fun, it also gives you a strong connection to the bike. Together with the very short reach to the handlebars, it results in a really agile and nimble character for the bike, which I personally really liked, and despite that, it's still fully capable at high speeds.
After the country road action, we've now arrived at the Slovakiaing, part 2 of our test, and we're dealing with changing conditions. It's a bit windy, and there's an occasional shower passing through. I hope it stays sunny for us. Let's take a quick look. What do we have for asphalt temperature? Yeah, 28.5, 29 degrees. Perfect. We also brought tire warmers, stands, pit carpet, everything you need for a serious attack on the racetrack. And now I'm hoping we can give you a solid insight and deliver proper test results in the sporty extreme range. Let's also take a quick look at our gear. You might have noticed that our test crew was all wearing Nex helmets, specifically the XR3R model. That's the sportiest helmet in the Nex portfolio. It's made with a carbon shell, pleasantly lightweight, 1,350 grams in size medium. And what I personally really liked was the great aerodynamics. With that additional spoiler element on the back, color matched to the visor, it really looks the part too. Visually, it's a real eye-catcher. Very classy and high-quality finish. The ventilation also impressed us. Even on the racetrack, our heads stayed cool. You can adjust it easily using the openings on the forehead, top of the head and chin area. That all worked great. And what was also really nice was the snug, sporty fit. especially for track riding, for sporty riding in general. It's truly a very exciting product. We really enjoyed it. Yeah, folks, what can I say? The Streetfighter V4S is absolutely fascinating on the racetrack. A motorcycle that leans into corners with ease, that's super agile. And when it counts, like through the fast sweepers here at the Slovakia ring, it also brings the stability you need to build confidence and develop a solid connection to the bike. We're talking over 210 horsepower here. And that on a naked bike where you're fully exposed to the wind. On the straights, you wouldn't believe it, I was ducking down like crazy, trying to get as small as possible just to find even a bit of wind protection from the display and the front end. But it's wild. At 260, 270 kilometers per hour, yeah, you can get there no problem. And when you hit the brakes, it's like the wind slams right into your chest again. You feel the wind buffeting your helmet, pulling at your neck. That's adrenaline. That's an experience. Seriously, this is blockbuster level stuff. Something else that really impressed me, and I definitely wanted to mention this, was the brake system. It's honestly insane how well this thing slows down. Out on the street, that was just a small taste. But here, going from those long straights into heavy braking zones, you really notice where the wheat gets separated from the chaff when it comes to braking performance. There's a fantastic level of stability, and at the same time, like I said at the beginning, it's still super agile. So yeah, I think you can hear it in my voice that the fascination is real. I just had an absolute blast riding this thing. Even on a demanding high-speed track like the Slovakia ring, it was just pure joy to be able to ride this machine here.
The well over 200 horsepower coming from this engine, the way it delivers that power, and it really performs on the racetrack. Out on the road, it wasn't always that easy to put it to good use because once you're above 8,000 or 9,000 RPM, you're usually already well into illegal speeds for public roads. But on the racetrack, that's exactly the rev range where you want to be. And that's when this thing really takes off. And the stable basic setup of the bike fits that perfectly because with these massive acceleration scenarios, there's a ton of weight transfer to the rear wheel. In those moments, you're definitely glad to have enough stability on board. And thanks to the new winglets and the counter-rotating engine, we've got a surprising amount of weight kept on the front tire, even under full throttle, which keeps the bike super stable and precisely on course. That's something you especially appreciate on the racetrack, and it actually makes it noticeably easier, even for less experienced riders, to ride fast and clean laps around the course.
Out on country roads, the Streetfighter was a bit of a moody beast for me, but on the racetrack I liked it a whole lot better. I'd even go so far as to say you can really tell that this motorcycle has been adapted from a race bike into a Streetfighter, into a naked bike. And that shows in the way it behaves, a bit edgy, a bit stubborn, especially on tight, twisty roads. But as soon as things get quicker, more flowing, more racetrack-like, the acceleration gets heavier, the corners open up, the speeds climb, that's when it suddenly starts to really work. That's when it begins to shine. With this bike, you can brake deep into corners really nicely because thanks to that wide handlebar, you get a really good feel for the front end. You can ease into the braking zone with confidence because the braking response is totally predictable, the pressure stays consistent, and the lever feel remains constant too. That's honestly just brilliant.
From a riding dynamics perspective, it's very agile, really easy to lean over, even at high speeds. Honestly, it's no problem at all to flick it from side to side, even through fast direction changes, almost playfully. That's something I personally really like. You actually have to be careful not to turn in too early because it tips in so easily. And that's a big advantage. I think that despite the weight and despite the big engine, it still works this well. Then on top of that, you also get a really good feel in a hang-off position. It gives you a strong sense of security through knee grip. You can really hold on well because your knee rests nicely against the edge here, giving you great stability through corners.
All right, folks, we've come to the end now, but now it's your turn. Did you enjoy the video? Then please give us a thumbs up. And if you've still got any questions on your mind, feel free to leave them in the comments below. We always love hearing your feedback. And last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more test videos coming up as part of this series and a big group comparison as well, where all the bikes are lined up side by side and we really dig into each model's strengths and weaknesses. So don't miss that. And now, seriously, take care everyone. See you next time.